Impulse Magazine 2014, welcome to another edition of Inspiring Youth, where I'm joined by podcaster Lewis Hamilton.
How's it going, folks?
And Lewis of Shadow Podcasts. So, Lewis, run us through exactly what it is you do on your podcasts.
Well, what do I do? Well, I've been a podcaster for about 2 years, a little over 2 years at this point. And I have about 3 or 4 shows. I have my main show at the moment, which is called Heads Up Display. And Heads Up Display is sort of like a vlog without the V part of it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of extricated the video from the formula, and because I feel that it can to some extent sort of superficialize, if that's a word. I'm not entirely sure. I think there's journalism students that are listening to this.
Superficialized sounds about.
Yes, as long as it sounds like it ought to be a word. The English language, which is interesting, speaking of Heads Up Display, I often will come across words that I'll glue together in my head, like superficialize, whether or not it's a word yet to be determined, and I'll sort of analyze and assess them, muse about them, and so it's become a sort of quasi, what had begun as a kind of vlog or a personal blog, an audio blog, has now become a quasi English language assessment and interpretation show, which it's not supposed to be that, and I've never vocalized that should be a theme in the description or anything like that, but it always seems to devolve to the same thing, you know.
Yeah.
Like strip poker only ever goes one way, you know.
Okay.
And it's the same kind of thing with Heads Up Display. I have another show, which I used to do, which was the first series that I began, one of my many series. There was basically political and current events where I would cover different topics, things that were going on in the news, and by the end of it I hated life. I mean, it was horrible. You know, I was just completely drained, like France in 1917, just had nothing left to give, and
Sure.
I gave up on the current events stuff, and that show was called Covers. I did about 25 episodes of that. They varied from about 8 minutes to about 40 minutes. I think I did a 40-minute assessment of the 2013 budget by George Osborne, which at the end of it, there was nothing left. That was one of the last shows I did in that series, and I jumped very quickly away from that. I wanted to go for something more positive, so something more positive was what I call a series that's called Versus Reality, which is a name I think could do with a little improvement, a little refining. I've considered calling it Things I Think Are Important That I Think You Ought to Feel Are Important as well. I might as well call it that.
That doesn't roll off the tongue quite
it's
as
not.
well.
It's not as synergetic when you put it together in a sentence. All of those words. And Versus Reality, ironically, jumping the shark into something more positive was born out of a fairly glum, windswept, rainy, grey Saturday afternoon in late June, which is, completely envisionable, which is probably not a word. In Scotland at least, that June would look like, crap.
Grey, yeah.
And I thought to myself, why have I not gone? This is a real thought pattern. I thought, why at this point, languishing on a minimum wage, 0-hour contract job, thanks government, have I not lost my mind? I thought, why have I not lost my mind yet? Because given the often in psychology they'll talk about environmental effects, and you're in that position, you're just like, oh God, to hell with all of it, And I thought to myself, how can I delve into the reasons that I don't feel like hell? And I think that often the fantasies that we have about the world, or the quasi-fabrications that go into our outlook on the world, the way we see the world. And it's always been the case from the old chivalric tales of the 1400s, where people were write about dashing white knights and maidens, and it gave their glum, I think I've said glum before already, their kind of dreary medieval lives that were usually nasty, brutish and short, some transcendent sense of morality or sense of transcendence. And I think that's the case. How many people went into astrophysics and became astrophysicists, consequently, because they watched Jean-Luc Picard at the helm of the USS Enterprise, in 1987 with Star Trek Enterprise, or not Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that's inspiring, but it's not real. but the fact that it isn't real doesn't really detract from its meaning.
So how people are inspired by their escapism, by the things, by the means that they escape, by music, by computer gaming, by films and television.
Yeah, that's called being concise. What Mike's just done.
Well, if you haven't already been able to tell, Lewis is a very frantic-minded individual, and that certainly rings true throughout his podcasts. So, what are some of the challenges that you face in podcasting? You know, is it simply thinking of the next thing to say? Is it exposure, getting the word out there?
It's definitely not so much professionally, because I'm not a professional. But I think in that kind of a medium, it's not really possible to be a professional, because the art form itself changes to, an art form, and it evokes the concept that you're not so much a professional as you are an artist. An artist, consequently, since people started to refer to that word more often, or to utilize it more often, has become bogged down in pretense. It's become very pretentious to refer to yourself as an artist. But I think in a way we're all artists, whether we have podcasts or we like acting or we like drawing things, watercolors. And so it's not really, it has been something that I've learned. So, there is heuristic knowledge involved, whereby you're examining something and working out how it operates. And you're saying, well, okay, this is what people like about my videos or my podcasts, which I upload on YouTube, which is why I say videos. And there are video elements to them, but it's not on camera like you and I right now. It's more, there'll be a graphic operating in the background. I used to have still frame images, but you learn a lot of things, what people like, what they don't like, but to some extent it really has to come from your own head, and it has to come from your own sense of how much do you want to express yourself and project stuff that's bouncing around inside your head. And in terms of the challenges, which is the main crux of your question, it's a very competitive space somewhere like YouTube. It's very saturated, but not so much with podcasts. iTunes is fairly saturated, but the problem with iTunes is, for most people, they don't fully understand how you would upload a podcast to iTunes. In addition to that, iTunes has a system whereby if you're not uploading podcasts, they're just going to take your video, your thing down, or they're going to halt it, and you're going to have to reinitialize it, and reinitiate the series itself. So you have to have some kind of consistency usually with iTunes, at least if your series is ongoing, or your podcast is ongoing. So I listen to a lot of podcasts over iTunes and things like that on my phone. But in addition to that, YouTube is very saturated, but not so much with podcasts. But the problem is, YouTube is like a huge street. It's a very wide road, a highway. And there's a lot of traffic going, I don't know if the street analogy was quite the best. There's a lot of traffic going in very specific directions, music, video games, things like that. You need to be able to draw some of that traffic away. Sure. And because I think of the limitations in the medium, some people do a thing where you basically have a podcast, but you're playing Call of Duty on the screen.
Sure.
I can't quite do that. I can't quite stoop, no offense, to having a podcast whereby I'm playing Minecraft at the same time, or I have some gameplay footage. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I've heard a very good analogy about this that I think kind of suits for what you're trying to say. I think the analogy was putting up things on YouTube is like releasing a message in a bottle out to a sea of messages in bottles.
Yes. Very competitive. With a lot of people, I think, that are in it for the wrong reasons. A lot of people, they see what the end product is of success, which is something I think, to some extent in Scotland, culturally, and this is only my own opinion, we sort of shy away from. We have this this outlook that, with a lot of itself, the outlook itself, with a lot of itself says that success is sort of a bad thing. It comes into this idea of profit that you see in economics, whereby for someone to have something, they must have taken something from someone else. And so people are very attracted to the end product of success because they want success for its own sake. And I think everybody can be successful in life, and they should want to be in different ways, whether it's a good family life or whatever. But the problem with YouTube is, there's a lot of people sniping at each other. There's also a lot of jealousy that goes on. You often hear about the people posting horrible things in comments on people's Twitters.
Just ultra competitive.
Yeah, that's some of the insecurities of our culture. There's a lot of people who say, well, the losers are going to be they're going to be sore about this, and they're going to post horrible things on Russell Brand's Twitter or something like that. But really, these people are not losers at all. They are simply not tapping into their potential. I found that the easiest way for me was to just sit down, turn my microphone on, and start talking. And you learn everything else along the way. People are competitive and they throw the messages and the balls out. But unless they're willing to build on it, unless they're willing to put the work in and really think about it for a long time, they're not going to go anywhere with it. And so that sea's going to be saturated with glass bottles and broken dreams.
So is that what you would say to people who want to get into podcasting? Just do it. Just grab a microphone and go.
The easiest way to do anything is to do it. It's functional. It works. Doing is a lot harder than you'd think. Because you could have a lot of, as I said, insecurities. Maybe you don't want to sit down in front of the microphone. Maybe you're worried about what people will think of the things that you think about and or your opinions on various matters. And usually, it comes down to, do you have the guts to really to put yourself out there in any artistic or creative sense? I think fundamentally people in schools, because politics is a large part of my outlook, are not taught to be creative, because schools view creativity as something that's too difficult to teach. So usually they just sweep it under the rug.
Right.
And it's causing huge damage. The world of tomorrow will be a world that's based on creativity and expression. It will be a world that's based on pen pushing and bean counting. It's just the case.
Well, on those rather frantic responses, if you're not at all interested in checking out one of Lewis's podcasts, then I think there's probably something wrong with you. So you can check out Lewis on YouTube at Shadow Podcasts.
Yes, it's www. or World Wide Web, cut out 6 syllables, do yourself a favor, .youtube.com/Shadow Channel 1, or you can just go to YouTube and type in Shadow Podcast. Mine are the first links that come up, I believe, depending where you live. They should be the first links that come up. Shadow Podcast.
Excellent. We'll have the video for Doctor Who versus Reality below this one. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Impulse14 rather, or on Facebook Impulse Magazine 2014. But thank you very much, Lewis, for joining us.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.